Welcome, everybody, to the David Samson Show. Happens every week. He's a host of Nothing Personal. You could follow him on Twitter at David P. Samson. And I begin with some sad news to report. David, how am I going to go on knowing that I'm not going to see Cardinals-Royals split squad action here in the month of March? I'm devastated. Usually, the first 4.5 innings over, always cash. And I don't know what to do with myself.
I thought you were going to say, how can I go on? How can I feed my beautiful daughter, who you know very well, without your dollar? That's what I thought your lead was. But you
we'll get to the dollar that you owe me.
You go, by the way, I'm putting it in her college fund in pennies. 1 penny a year for the next 100 years.
Put it in polka dot, and that dollar may be 8.
I'm going to put it in that. What's that Francis Suarez? Billy Corbin taught me about
Miami
something.
coin? Let's go.
Yeah, Miami coin. I'm going to give her $1.
This is going to end up with me owing you $25 by 2033.
And you being arrested.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, you're not going to see split squad games yet, but you're going to get spring training games, I promise, just not today. They're supposed to start on my birthday, actually. On February 26th was the first game. But there will not be spring training games February 26th. In order for that to happen, there needed to have been an agreement already. The next date that we need to look for is a week from today. So a week from today is the deadline by which they have to have a deal done in order to have opening day on March 31st. And there's a meeting today. I don't know, are you releasing this today, Thursday?
Yes.
Okay, so today at 1 p.m. there is a meeting where the players are going to counter the owner's last offer of last Saturday. And I'm not looking for what's inside this offer. The most important thing about today is how long it takes for the owners to respond to today. And the reason why that's interesting is that it's been sometimes 40 days between counters, and then 20 days, and then 7 days, and then 5 days. You know it's getting serious when it's 1 day between counters.
What is being manipulated through media means? Obviously, MLB actually has their own media arm here, but it's hard to decipher exactly where we are in the proceedings because each arm is leveraging their media interest.
Yeah, it's easy if you actually think about it. And this was when you're running a team, you sort of figure out which writers are pimping for which sides and which agents. John Heyman was always famous for carrying the water for Scott Boras, no matter how much he denies it, and I like John just fine. But when Scott Boras wants something out, it goes through John Heyman. There are people on the owner's side who think that Evan and Drellick at The Athletic is talking for Bruce Meyer, who is the negotiator for the union. Everyone knows that Jeff Passan gets information from the league that he then releases when the league does a offer. But none of that really matters tremendously. All I can tell you is that it doesn't matter what the media tells the fans because the players and the owners are paying attention to none of that. They just tell you they want the PR on their side. But even when it's not, they don't come off their position just to get your love and attention.
Tell us about what happened with the cutting of minor league jobs this week.
Yeah, that was much ado about nothing, William. Unbelievable. So here's the bottom line. I've told you on this show and on Nothing Personal that the extra players at the minor leagues made me crazy. We're paying a ton of money for people who have no shot. They might as well be Mike and me and you in those minor league camps, on those minor league teams. They are simply filler, like extras in the movie Major League. I'm not talking about Serrano. I'm talking about guys who are in the background on the end of the bench. And the purpose of the minor leagues is to become a big leaguer. Why would you spend money in research and development on something that you know is never going to be developed? It makes no sense. But this is a huge Fugazi issue. Right now, only 2 teams have more than 180 players. Several teams have below 150 players. And all the owners said is we want the right to have 150 players, but not the guarantee that that's where it's going to end up. And the number has been inflated recently because of COVID, and they needed extra bodies around. However, none of that actually matters, so start listening now. The players don't give a shit about this issue. They are not going to need it. They're not going to ask for it. They're not going to want a concession in order to give it. The owners are not going to give a concession in order to get it. Owners, players, it's not a core economic issue. It's not even a disagreement.
What's not a Fugazi issue, though, is that minor leaguers are treated...
Fugazi or Fugazi?
I thought it was Fugazi, or maybe it's Benghazi and Fugazi.
I always heard Fugazi. Is this a tomato thing?
It did make me, the way you were pronouncing it did make me think what he just thought, which is, are you talking about foreign prison? Something pronounced
I
like
don't know. The way that 90s rappers pronounced it was Fugazi, and that's how I learned that word.
Put it on the poll, Fugazi or Fugazi. But what's not a fake issue is that minor leaguers are treated very poorly. They have bad wages. They, live. Don't laugh at me because it's true. The way
Just asking where you're getting this from.
I mean, my minor league
First-hand
coverage.
accounts.
My minor league coverage.
Well, second-hand accounts. I was never a minor leaguer.
My minor league coverage, which admittedly is dated, is something that is echoed now in the reporting I see of we get a sandwich with a piece of cheese on it, and I have to live at a home in a small town neighborhood that has either 6 of my teammates in it, or I live with an old couple who wants to have a young person around.
Well, first of all, you make that sound sort of like misery, but I like, you run a big company now. Meadowlark Media, you're hiring people. Do you treat everybody the same at every level of the organization? All the benefits, the salary? I'm just curious, is there any differentiation between what you make, let's say, and what the person you just hired to help intern in marketing makes?
Yes, Stugotz makes it all.
Okay, so you can be as argumentative and as funny as you want, which is how you cover up ignorance, and I'm all in for you being here.
Our benefits are the same. Our benefits
they're not. They're not.
Our salaries are not the same. Our benefits are the same, and everyone here has ownership in the company. The minor leagues is a coal mine for the major leagues, and they're bodies that are thrown into a mill to get to the major leagues. And you're giving the executive opinion, which is a very cold one.
Not. No, I'm trying to give you the facts.
But you don't care about minor leaguers.
No. I'm giving you the facts. You can give me your whole employment stock ownership plan and all the ESOPs and all the big companies do it. Avis, we try harder. Hey, we're employee owned and it makes us better and happier. Minor league players make the decision and we don't lie to them. They know very well when they come into camp, when they're drafted, what kind of attention they're getting from the hitting coaches, the coordinators. They know very well whether they are prospects or whether they are not. We don't lie to them. We don't say, hey, just hang in there, eat one more grilled cheese sandwich.
It doesn't make it right, David. It doesn't make it right.
Wait, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Right versus wrong? If we told a bunch of 18-year-olds, listen, do me a favor. Come to camp. Live on no money because you're going to be making $500,000 a year just next year. That's a Ponzi scheme. That would be lying. I've never once heard anybody tell a minor leaguer, nor have I ever told the minor leaguer who we knew was a fringe non-prospect that they were anything other than a fringe non-prospect. Now, do we treat first-round draft picks better than 50th-round draft picks or people who just come in to play backup center field in Double-A? Yes, we do. Everybody does. All 30 teams do. Could it be that minor league players could get paid more doing something else? You're damn right. And so could interns in every agency in Hollywood could make more money doing something else, but they're there for a dream, however unrealistic it may be. And they are told when they get there, you're not going to rep Tom Cruise. The odds are de minimis. Every once in a while, you get Mike Piazza or Albert Pujols, but other than that, the odds are you're never going to be an agent for anybody. That is just how the world of business works. I appreciate how you're trying to fight for the little guy. I really do. And you're making me seem like the big, bad corporate exec because it's the role you want me to play. But I'm just trying to tell you how it works within an organization.
I don't think there's any question, at least amongst us, on how this works. And I don't think it's a bait and switch for prospects. They know what they're getting into. I think I agree with Dan's sentiment that it should still be better. In hearing you speak, there's a lot of similarities between the minor league baseball players and my climb here on the show back when unpaid internships in radio were really laborious. I had to say yes to everything. I felt like I had a million promises fall through the cracks, and I felt lied to, and I almost quit on it. Looking back on the experience, I'm thankful for it because there's many ways to shake all these hands off the branch, and that internship process made me stand out over 20 other people that might have quit. But at the same time, I look back on it, and I wish it were easier. I wish I had money for gas. I wish I had just like the slightest bit of humanity attached to it.
If it were easy, then everyone would do it. Mike, are you telling me that everyone around you who was an intern with you in your early days, are they all where you are now?
No, but a lot of the interns, I mean, where I am now, I'm very blessed to have the number one sports podcast in America. Not a lot of people have that, but a lot of the interns do still work in media. A couple of them work on our show.
So there's a differentiating factor, though. You did the work. You said yes whenever your bosses asked you to do anything, and you had talent, and then you got a break, and then you took advantage of the break, and you rode the right horse. And now look where you are. And there are people who make decisions within every company. It doesn't matter if it's a baseball team. They choose the wrong executive. They choose the wrong mentor, or they don't have the talent or the skill. That's just the world we're in.
You say the executive, I want you to play, and this isn't you playing. You are someone who is a business assassin. You cut through some of the business, the bullshit, with cold truths that are unpleasant. And I don't want to argue with you about this because it's the easy position for me to argue for not only the little guy waving around a flimsy ham sandwich. You know how offensive that is to me, that it would be flimsy. Saying
and
this
me,
is,
we don't serve ham.
This is not the way that you treat employees. But baseball does get certain benefits from being a monopoly, and this is their pipeline and their system. And it can be more humane, and it's not more humane because it feels like to me, in talking to you through the past, you don't care about the minor leaguers. Like that, you've told us before that the major league clubs don't care about the minor leaguers.
The minor league non-prospects, I said.
As people, though,
that's a big difference.
But as human beings, as you need 9 players on a field. Like they get hurt, and you need to have some of those guys filling out rosters.
One of the biggest budget line items when you run a Major League Baseball team is the cost of your minor leagues, and that does not exist in the NBA or the NFL. The NFL minor leagues is, let's say, college, or it would be like the NFL teams paying the NIL sponsorships. Do you think the owners, just out of curiosity, if you got Steven Ross here, bad example. If you got bad example. Just whatever. Pick an NFL owner. Would they be interested in paying NIL sponsorships so that players who they're going to draft go to college, which is the minor leagues for NFL? I'm just curious.
But that's not right either, David. Like the NFL has the most, the best deal possible in its minor leagues. They've got a free minor leagues. Like it's crazy.
Right.
It's crazy.
And we look at that and get jealous. So the NBA started the G League. So this goes back to the number of players. Can you imagine the G League, just out of curiosity? Do you know how many players are on a G League team?
I'd guess 10.
Wait, I'm sorry, but you say you look at it and you get jealous, but you could have made NCAA baseball your minor leagues. You could have. You continue to choose not to.
That is a great question. That could be an entire show, because we have had hours and hours of meetings and conversations about why getting players out of high school is better than getting players out of college, even though college players in theory can be closer to the big leagues. And the reason why you want high school players is that the entire age bracket of major leaguers is moving younger, which is why there's a fight now with the union, because the older players are realizing if we don't hit free agency until 30, we're not going to get paid, because 30 is now over the hill in baseball, because the most productive age is now 23 to 27, 23 to 28. And in order to get a college person, they're 21 when they first get to the drafted, and then you're going to miss their prime.
European football had about 100-year head start on American sports. And I do think eventually we'll get to the day where people follow the model, where these professional franchises see that we need to start developing our own talent. We need to start having schools. We need to start scouting 3-4-year-olds, and we'll develop them within our own campus and have a graduate program. And that's the way that MLS soccer is already heading that way with their farm systems.
MLB is doing that with academies. As a matter of fact, when the Marlins did a stadium deal back in 2009, one of the things that was promised was an MLB academy in Miami. And we had the commissioner, Bob Dupay, the president of baseball, came, and there were a bunch of commissioners from Miami-Dade. Billy Corbin should have been there. I would have loved it. And it was like a groundbreaking, but then ground was never broken because financing can never be agreed to. And it was all a Benghazi. But in any case, there are these academies in certain places around the country. But what you're saying, got rejected in baseball because of the expense, which was each team having its own academy, and those players are the property of the team. That got rejected. Wait, just to be clear, in your model in soccer, are they the property of the parent team, those kids?
Yeah, and the club can then issue certain talents that they don't feel have an investment on. They have their developmental squads. They have like U12 teams, U18 teams. They have junior squads, and you can get promoted all the way up to the main squad. In fact, Chelsea, the current, you can say world champion now because they just won the Club World Cup, they have one of the best academies in all of world football. The prestigious.
But can you leave? If you're an 11-year-old,
you can choose to.
You are on Chelsea, can you leave and go play for Tottenham?
I believe you can come to. I think contracts can be mutually broken. I don't know enough about the academy contracts, but I do think if a 12-year-old doesn't want to be at an academy anymore, they have the freedom to leave.
Because MLB is trying with this play ball initiative that Rob Manfred started to get younger kids playing, more kids playing. He wants more women playing, more girls, more boys, everybody playing. Because the view was of the owners that when you get younger people playing, either they're good enough that they're eventually going to play Major League Baseball, or they're just going to become fans. And when they're not good enough, they're going to want to, engage with the game and spend their money on the game. But the concept of having a player who's 6 years old in Little League, like that would be, Alex Rodriguez is an example. Wasn't he an example of a player who was really good in Miami, or Mike Lowell, that they would have just been in the Marlins Academy and then would have been Marlins? And the unfair advantage is that weather, right? You'd have to be everything's in Florida or where the warm weather states are.
But isn't that why you guys do your best, some of your best and most efficient, cheapest mining in the Dominican Republic and in other places where you can put these academies and you can sort of circumvent even before the minor leagues, before getting to the minor leagues, you can get players even cheaper than you get them in the minor leagues.
It's a dream come true, right? The way it's the per cap success of players in the Dominican, it's just bizarre. Right, it doesn't make sense that you can go there and you could throw a stone and you hit a playground with a dirt field and you've got players who use basically their bare hands as gloves, and you wonder why they're such good fielders. You wonder how they're so tough because they have no shoes. When we went to Cuba, we saw how Jose started. Right, when he was in Cuba, it's crazy, and there's so much talent, and it's the cheapest talent to acquire. And that's a goal when you're running a business. Anytime you can get a greater return off your product, you do that. And the product is the player. The greater return means the less investment. And the Dominican is the greatest return possible for these teams.
In America, we're kind of heading that way with baseball. You'll still have Vanderbilt pitchers that go number one overall. But the general consensus is, well, if you're in college and you didn't make the pros out of high school, you didn't get drafted out of high school, how good of a prospect can you be? That's why MLS draft picks are useless, because the really good players have been developed at age 12. I used to talk to the head of the academy over at Chelsea, and he's scouting 3- and 4-year-olds, and you're asking, how can you tell what a 3- and 4-year-old is good at? And you know what they told me, David? I found it fascinating. They look for the one thing that they're exceptional at. Just be exceptional at one thing, and our academy can make you all right in all the other facets. But
you mean like dribbling?
Yeah, but if a 3- to 4-year-old doesn't that's
a good joke. It's a good joke. I mean,
I would have gotten it if it was like 2.
Oh yeah, I don't think of a 3 or a 4-year-old dribbling, but it was a good joke.
But
David, the publicity around this trial involving the former Anaheim pitcher whose his last name is Skaggs, first name escapes me, but Matt Harvey's testimony that's probably going to get him a suspension involved hard drug use and pill popping and an honesty that was made me a bit sad for Matt Harvey and a bit sad for everybody involved in this, because they're chronicling an addiction that resulted in a death, and there are some really unpleasant details coming out.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't want to compliment Matt Harvey for his honesty. He was under oath when he said these things, and he had immunity. So if you're not going to be honest when both you're under oath and you have immunity, then I guess honesty is never something that will happen. I encourage people on Wednesday's edition of Nothing Personal. I did about the first 20 minutes on opioids in baseball and opioids in society. And I've heard from, I cannot believe how many people, Dan, who are struggling with opioid addiction, who got to me on Twitter and were so thankful that someone was willing to talk about it in the way I was willing to talk about it, because we're aware of the opioid use. And I don't want to, the word complicit has such a pejorative connotation, but I would say that we need the players to be on the field. And the players can't play 162 games without amphetamines. We don't give them amphetamines. Then they need Red Bull and cafecitos and Cuban coffee, but then their heart rate is off the charts and the doctor says they're risking dropping dead. You got to take that out of the clubhouse or you have to monitor what they're doing. By the way, when you're injured, get better, because when you go to arbitration, we're going to point out to the arbitrators every game you missed. Every time you went on the DL, that is going to be a demerit to what you are going to make going forward. So the entire system is rigged toward drug use. It's rigged toward PED use, and that has not changed. It's not changing in this next agreement. What's coming out in this trial, however, is that as careful as we have been about opioid distribution in the clubhouse, where we monitor the number of pills we give players post-surgery, we monitor when the players take it, it's all written down, it's all logged. We do not necessarily know enough to look for addiction when it's right in front of us. And if I had a Tyler Skaggs on my team, I'm not sure that I would know whether he was in his hotel room and crushing pills and snorting them. Would I know that certain players are wired in a certain way before a game? I wouldn't think that that was cocaine versus the other things they do to get up, like we talked about coffee and Red Bull. I had no idea that Jose Fernandez ever touched cocaine. I saw players smoke pot. I never saw players do coke before a game. I never saw players do coke during a game. I never saw players crush drugs and snort drugs. And I've been in the players' hotel rooms. I've seen a lot of stuff in hotel rooms, most of which you don't want to talk about, but it didn't involve drugs. But the reality was there are things that go on. The sadness here is that people, not just in baseball, it's people around the country, are suffering in silence, and there's nothing anyone can do about it, and they're dying because of fentanyl.
I have a number of follow-up questions, but during games caught me a little bit off guard. That hard a drug use.
Do you remember the Boston Red Sox championship team where they were laughing and loving the fact that they were drinking during games?
Drinking before, just a shot before games, not drinking during. I mean, it wasn't drinking during games.
It was like chicken and beer, right?
It was.
There's drinking during games, Dan.
You're talking about the championship team that we adored that was
knuckleheads?
They were doing shots, and so we celebrated it as fun, or the John Lackey teams that underachieved, so we pointed out that they were drinking beer and eating fried chicken. Which team?
So you're a consequentialist. Obviously, it's fun when you win, and when you don't win, they're a bunch of, degenerates. That's the joke of the way when we talk to players that we laugh about that. All they have to do is win games, and all other things that they do just get overlooked. You want domestic violence? You better be good at your game. You better be good at what you do, or you're going to be forgotten. You want to do drugs? You better win games. You're Doc Ellis. We laugh. Doc Ellis threw a no-hitter when he was on LSD. Ha, ha, ha. There's nothing funny about that. There's nothing funny about the drug use that happens in this country and the people who normalize it by being able to do their jobs while being addicts, therefore making it impossible for any employee assistance program to work because they don't think they need assistance.
You mentioned if you had a Tyler Skaggs, and one of your first draft picks with the Florida Marlins, Jeff Allison, had
a nightmare,
had an addiction problem. We talked a little bit about your experience with him during the lockdown shows, but I think this is a good time to call it back. What lengths did you go to help Jeff Allison out, and did it open your eyes to how bad this problem could be within your sport?
Do you know, I think about Mike, and I know Jeff Allison, and I know what he's doing now, and he's gotten his life together. All I cared about back then, and I'll admit it because I do, all I cared about was not having to pay him his bonus. It's so unbelievable where your head is when you're running a team and when you don't take the time to have emotion or have pity or have anything other than bottom line stress. All I cared about was proving the fact that he lied to us about his drug addiction. I made sure we had a psychologist on board who would make sure that he was being looked at and being treated. But I just cared about the contract and cared about making sure we didn't have to pay him his money. Now, once we didn't have to pay him his money, I then was able to go into more fatherly mode and follow up and say, well, now that we've won that, now let's see if we can save your life. And by the way, we only want to save your life because it can't be a wasted draft pick. We want you to pitch for us. You're so good. Get yourself together so you can come back. And I look back at Jeff Allison as just a sad case of someone who we were inside the house We had scouts who were with his friends, with his family, with him, and we thought that it was clean and it was good. And it turns out that everyone was lying to us, and it wasn't being done in front of our scouts. And the minute we got to camp, basically, he was testing positive. So that is a very tragic story.
When you talk about people reaching out to you on opioids and you reaching that one with compassion, because you are not the person anymore that you were then, and you're not in the job anymore that you were in then. I like how you speak about these things plainly, but they're really cold. And so in the time since, you've learned something about when this thing gets a grip on people, how it'll ruin lives. And I want to ask you what you were saying about the cruelty of the system. The human body is not made to play 162 of those games traveling all over America, David. So there's got to be some pain relief, no matter how young and fit you are, that somebody's going to seek wherever they could get pain relief, massage or somewhere else. And once these things, to people who can have addictive personalities, I don't know if athletes are more or less addictive, but I know that I've met a lot of them with compulsions. It's very easy to fall into death because you no longer can control whether you're doing blow in the dugout or whether you're doing, whether you're cracking pills and snorting them during games.
Well, I think the biggest problem happening right now is the introduction of fentanyl to these pills. So when Tyler Skaggs got his Oxycontin, and we don't know exactly about the Percocet. We don't think there was Percocet. We just don't have that information. At least it's not public right now. And when you crush it and snort it and it has fentanyl and you mix it with alcohol, that kills you. There are people now who are doing drugs who have machines. When they get their Coke, they are making sure it's not laced with fentanyl. And the problem with opioids is that it's much more difficult to know what is inside it. And when you don't get it from an actual doctor, but you go online or you get it from someone in your PR department who's getting it from someone who they don't know where they're getting it from, so you don't know that it's real and pure, if I could say that word, which is normally associated with cocaine, you are risking death if it mixes wrong. And that's what should put the fear of God. The same fear that I have why I've never done cocaine is all about Len Bias in 1986. That's why I've never done cocaine in my life, and I never will. And I've seen it. I've seen people do it. I've been around people who've done it. I've never taken a one little powder because of Len Bias. People who have seen or understand what happens when there's fentanyl, they will never do drugs again.
I feel like sometimes I take your honesty for granted, and many in the audience probably would have heard your bit on Jeff Allison and might have just had their jaw drop a little bit at how honest you were about displaying some behavior that I have no doubt right now you probably have your regrets about. How differently today would something like Jeff Allison be handled?
He wouldn't have been drafted. And then he just would have been ignored, and he probably would have died.
How would he have not been drafted if you guys had everyone investigating everything about him and still it was hidden? You had no idea.
Yeah, it's so different now than it was 15 years ago. There's just so much more access. There's so much more science. There's so much more testing. It's just the technology's just gotten better, that the scouts just have a much better idea. They do personality tests on people now. They do all sorts of things before drafting because you are investing so much in a first-round pick and there's so much on the line. I just don't think Jeff Allison out of high school would have been drafted today.
To be clear with the audience, and I suggest you check out Nothing Personal because the perspective of David Samson is an unusual one. You do not hear it very much in the press. Not what he actually thinks. It's throughout sports executive-dom, but most people do not say it. And when he speaks that coldly, I'm jarred, David, to hear you. But yet I understand the perspective of these are all commodities to be run through the machine so the bottom line could be hit. You were very good at your job. You were an assassin at your job. It almost doesn't allow for a certain humanity when it gets in the way of the bottom line.
Well, we've talked about that. That is the robotic way in which I ran a team that then impacted my personal life because I became robotic off and on the field. And I've been out of the game 5 years now, And what I'm seeing as time, the first 2 years, I felt, after October of 17, I felt as though I would never have a purpose again. I felt as though I was defined solely by my job. I was the president of a Major League Baseball team with a World Series ring. Look at me. I'm a BSD, right? And then you realize there's life outside of baseball, and I gained some perspective, and time tends to do that. And you can't teach it. You just have to acquire it. So the more interesting question that I think about is if I were hired and I wanted to, which I don't because I love doing nothing personal, and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, would I run a team again? And if I did, I run it differently? And the answer is that I would run it differently for the first 60 days, and then I would realize that I was at a competitive disadvantage because of my emotion, and I would then be reminded, like through muscle memory, of the decisions that have to be made in order to run a company as profitably as possible and win as many games as possible in that order. And I'm afraid that all the work that I've accomplished over the last several years would disappear within 2 months.
You're arguing basically that in order to be good, you cannot be good at that job, at that level of power in the sport, unless you are a emotional asshole as it relates to this stuff we're talking about. Like, just close.
If you don't have emotion, that's not being an emotional asshole, is it?
Okay, an emotionless. Fair enough. Fair enough. An emotionless asshole, that you have to be cutthroat or you'll lose to the guy who's more cutthroat.
Just remember, when you see all of the PR opportunities with all the team presidents who are out there giving out turkeys at Thanksgiving and bringing meals to people in nursing homes, it's photo ops done so you can say that you are a productive part of your community. And then the camera goes off, the tie comes off, you go back to your office and go back to running the business, having no thought of anything outside of your ivory tower. That's the reality of everybody who does this, and you can deny it, and team presidents and owners will deny it, and they'll say, oh, I started Rise, or I, as the owner of the Dolphins, I'm the one who stands for equality and diversity and inclusion, and it is an absolute bunch of horse hockey.
As a lawyer watching that trial, beyond the impact of drugs, can you walk me through what you think is happening there, and also how rare it is for your supplier to be the head of your public relations department?
So PR guys, the way it works in a clubhouse is PR guys are around the clubhouse all the time, pre-game, during game, post-game, any interview. Dan, you should know from your time in Miami radio, when you wanted to get a player, you had to go through Marlins PR. And then they'd tell you to screw off, and that'd be the end of it, because they go to the player. They say, hey, do you want to go on LeBatard? They say, I don't want to go on LeBatard. Don't be ridiculous. And the PR guy says, fine. So whatever the player wants. There are 7 people in the clubhouse at any given moment whose sole job is to do whatever the player wants. You want the phone number of the woman in section 111? Done. You want the phone number of the man in section 104? Do you want him to come down and be in the linen closet in the 4th inning? Done. You want me to go get a quarter pounder with cheese? No problem. Dry cleaning? I'm in. Whatever you want, I will do. That is what clubbies do. That is what PR people do at the lower levels. You need drugs? I got drugs. By the way, I'm taking those drugs, so I'll give you some of the drugs. Make sure you pay me, because you make $1 million and I make $22,000. So by the way, I'm going to make a profit off these drugs as well. So this is not news to anyone in professional sports.
And the details of the trial?
So I want to explain what's happening. In a criminal case, obviously, you have to prove, the prosecution, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Tyler Skaggs died as a result of the drugs given to him by Eric K. Beyond a reasonable doubt. There can be no other explanation, which is why the defense has said, well, what about at the airport where the team takes off? Does anyone have access to the team plane who could have given Tyler the drugs on the way to Texas? By the way, Matt Harvey, have you ever seen anyone else give drugs to you or to anyone on the Angels? Not trying to prove that Eric K. didn't give the drugs to Tyler Skaggs, but trying to say, hey, it may be possibly there's some scintilla of a doubt that it was someone other than Eric K. That's what the defense is trying to prove. The prosecution is trying to prove there was no other person. It was simply Eric K. who gave drugs to Tyler Skaggs, and Tyler Skaggs died because of those drugs.
Last week, you and I made a bet that the James Harden for Ben Simmons trade would or wouldn't happen. I was team it would. You were team it would not. You still haven't paid me $1. I'm going to hold you to that $1. We covered that already. But let's make another bet right now. It seems as though the ownership in 2 NFL franchises might be a little bit on unsettled ground, to put it nicely. Stephen Ross and Daniel Snyder. Daniel Snyder has a few more strikes against him, but I think the tanking allegations, it would appear, given that the NFL is investigating right now and how they gave that news story after the Super Bowl, it would appear like there might be something to this that is certainly worth looking into. I would like to bet you that one of either Stephen Ross or Daniel Snyder lose their franchise.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm going to take that bet because you framed it in a way that you framed it incorrectly.
Okay.
You said that one of those 2 franchises will get taken away from the owners.
You say sold.
That's the bet?
You say sold.
You said taken away. Which, if you had said, I believe there will be a new owner in either Miami or what?
Can I do it again?
Well,
I'm going to do it
stakes
again.
are too high. Now you're in, and it's done. It's a done deal. He's going to catch you in a loophole because the stakes have risen to an unreasonable
New
place.
ownership groups. I'm not shaving my head again.
That's not the bet. We're betting $1, Mortimer.
Just another $1.
Yeah, no, there will be a new owner in either Miami or Washington. I agree with you, but the NFL owners will not vote to remove the franchise a la Bernie Sterling. Donald Sterling.
They'll figure out a way to camouflage it by just Snyder will finally sell his team.
Somebody, one of the 2 will sell, but it will not be taken away.
If you had to bet,
Correct.
On one specific owner, Ross or Snyder, who's more likely?
I would bet Ross because he's an octogenarian and because they already have a succession plan in place. So I believe that that's how it'll go.
What is a succession plan?
There's this guy. I thought his name was Bradley Beal, but it's not because that's the NBA player. But maybe it's Stephen Beal, or I could. It's right there. Just GTS. Google that shit. There's the succession plan is what every single major sports team has to submit to the commissioner. What happens if the owner dies?
Bruce Beal.
Who gets the team? Bruce Beal. Thank you very much.
He was approved in 2016 by the NFL as a successor to Stephen Ross. I didn't know that the NFL did these deals. I didn't know that they already approved somebody.
Yes, sir. You have to have a plan in place. When you got a lot of old white people in a room, shit's going to happen.
Mike Ryan has his mouth is hanging wide
Did you know
open.
this?
I did not know this, but there were a number of things that he says every week that I do not know. So the average owner owns a team 39 years. The average player, you got to move that decimal point because 39 years is crazy to think that these teams don't change hands. I loved, though, and obviously it'll never happen, but tell me how hard it would be for something like this to happen, given that you just mentioned old white men. Antonio Brown said Kanye's going to buy a team, and I want that so badly.
Mark Cuban has a better chance of buying a baseball team than Kanye does of getting any team.
But a guy like that, somebody like that, would that person ever make their way close to anything?
No, never. Maybe onto Steve Ross's red carpet. Remember when he had all those celebrity owners that he thought would bring out the best of Miami? I can't remember what it was called, but they had like Mark Anthony.
Yeah, the red carpet.
Was it the teal carpet or the orange carpet?
Yeah, whatever.
It was orange
Whatever.
carpet.
The aqua carpet. What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Stefan's.
Yeah, that was great. Serena Williams.
I'm reading more. I'm reading more about Bruce Beal. So he apparently has the right of first refusal. So maybe there could be some influence behind the scenes. It's like, we can't have another white guy owner. We can't have another white guy owner right now. I don't know how they exactly work that out, but apparently this is from Dolphins Talk, not a verified news source. But let me ask you the question. Would you be surprised if Bruce Beal lawyered up during the process of Brian Flores' lawsuit?
Oh, he already has lawyered up. Yes, he has to lawyer up. Everybody is lawyered up fully.
Speaking of which, the NFL has reportedly hired former U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch. What did you make of that? Because it it was pretty inescapable that Brian Flores, and other people have mentioned this before me, that Brian Flores went with a legal team that is all white, that there was no Rooney Rule applied to the optics of his law firm. What's happening in the choice and the optics of what the NFL just chose? Because these choices are purposeful, right? Not just for the person being strong, but the optics you need to present.
I just want to make sure you're clear on something, and I don't want anyone to look back on this episode. Loretta Lynch is an unbelievably qualified attorney, notwithstanding her color or her gender. She is an unbelievably qualified attorney to represent the NFL in this case. Is it a bonus that she's a woman and a person of color? I never looked at it that way. When I need an attorney to defend my asset, I wanted the best person, period. Period. And the reason why Brian Flores has two white guys, it happens to be one of them is the top plaintiff's lawyer, like really good. We used to call them, back in the good old days, ambulance chasers. I'm sure that expression is not used anymore. That's lawyers who follow around ambulances and you get hurt and then you say, hey, hire me, I'll get you money from the place where you just slipped and fell.
They're all over South Florida. The billboards are great. It's they still exist. Why wouldn't you call them still ambulance chasers?
I don't know if that's an expression that makes me seem like a boomer. I don't know if people use that. Mike, do you use that?
I was going to say, yeah, I think they're still called that. I was going to say, is this insensitive now? Are we insensitive to lawyers?
No, I refuse. I will not be that sensitive. I am telling you that all over South Florida, I see billboards and buses with 1-800-slip-and-fall guy who is absolutely an ambulance chaser. The way he makes his money is hoping you slip and fall.
Careful, Dan. I care about you. You're closing off quite the sales path.
He plants the ice. Now, so the lawyer is a good plaintiff's lawyer and is good at getting settlements. So that's the interesting thing here. Brian Flores, I don't believe, was interested in a settlement, but I've completely changed my mind about Brian Flores, and I talked about this a little bit, and it's a bit third railish, but I'll tell you, when he amended his lawsuit to include the Texans after Lovie Smith got the job and he went public saying, that should have been me, I thought he went on all the news stations saying, this is about planting trees whose shade I will never enjoy. I'm trying to effectuate change so that people of color have opportunities that I don't have, and that when they're hired, they have second chances and third chances, and that their contracts are the same. We need better diversity. Lovie Smith gets hired. Whatever reason you want to say he got hired. And Brian Flores says, hey, I should have had that job, but for the fact that I was suing the NFL. No shit, Sherlock. That's exactly why you didn't get the job. But how could you go public and do that to Lovie and then amend your lawsuit to include the Texans? I just found it disingenuous because maybe it turns out Brian Flores filed the suit not on behalf of every black man or person in the world, but on behalf of himself.
Okay, so walk me through some of this. You've changed your mind on this, and it's a fairly stark turn from how you talked about this at the beginning. Flores is not freedom fighting the way that you'd like. Flores needs
That's not up to me to say.
Okay, no, but what I'm asking you is, in what you've seen happen that has changed your mind, and it's fair to change your mind with more information, do you look at this and wonder, was this a rash decision made quickly and emotionally, and now you've got settlement suit lawyers who just want to get a money grab out of this while you position yourself as the freedom fighter and you go on television telling us this is your cause that I have to lose before others can win, and you do it purposely before the Texans hire, so you blow up that job when you could have waited 2 more jobs to file your lawsuit and not had it land on the first day of Black History Month. There are things here that are publicity craven. There are things here that are about optics, but you think we're headed towards settlement now? Like, you think we're already going to get to the point we're not going to see any of this stuff from the owners because they're going to write a check and get rid of Flores, and that'll be the end of it?
Well, I always thought that. There was no way you're going to have depositions and a jury trial as people are trying to prove, oh, no, we hire black people just as much as white people. And no, you're going to have investigations done by the NFL in order to find the Dolphins and take some draft picks away from the Giants for sham interviews and violations of the Rooney Rule. But where I've changed my mind is I thought Brian Flores would be the perfect face for this type of lawsuit, this reckoning. How amazing is it that he was willing to do this? He was willing to give up his coaching career, something that he cared about so much, for an issue that's way more important than coaching in Super Bowls. Because 50 years from now, no one will remember who was the coach of the Super Bowl winning say Los Angeles Rams. People will not remember, oh, yeah, that was that Sean McKay guy or McVay or Timothy McVay. No one remember that.
They might remember.
You take that back.
They might remember.
Timothy. This is one of the game's
Holy shit.
brilliant minds.
But
you woke Roy. You startled Roy from a deep slumber. He woke up and hit his head on
That was
the
an
microphone.
Oklahoma City bomber that you pulled?
He did. Timothy McVay is what he did. Yeah.
So Bradley Beal is owning the Dolphins, and an Oklahoma City bomber was coaching the Rams.
So 50 years from now, it might as well be. Haven't you ever played a game? Guess what year this happened? And it happened in what year did the Civil War start? And if someone says, oh, wasn't that like 18 in the 1890s? And you say, yeah, that's close enough, right? It was the 1860s. 30 years. What's the difference? That's only 150 years ago. 150 years ago, the difference between the 1970s and the 2010s. Wait, was Vince Lombardi the coach of Brett Favre?
Fine. I don't want to argue about this.
I'm not arguing. I'm just saying that I thought Brian Flores knew what he was doing. I thought he chose February 1st on purpose. I thought he knew that he was not getting jobs. I thought he wanted to be the face of change. And then not more than a week later, he changed his lawsuit saying that job should have been mine.
Last question before your review. When this goes to trial, because if this does end up being about money and a principle, and Flores just will not settle, let's just say that that's where we end up here. Can we trace some of this with him to find out whether or not his legal fees will be more than whatever it is that he wins in this settlement? Because going up against the NFL as a single individual with your lawyers, you're going to run up a tab. Is part of the settlement going to be the NFL will then pay for all of your lawyer fees?
No, plaintiffs' attorneys generally work on something called a contingency, which means that they take, let's say, 30% of whatever a settlement is that is received, or whatever your jury award is. And so they've got that's what plaintiffs' lawyers do. So they've got the infrastructure in place to handle the big New York law firms who put a lot of documents in front of them. But then they make a decision before they take a case like this. Is the juice worth the squeeze? How much money am I going to have to spend if this case goes all the way? And you say to Brian Flores, listen, we're going to be your lawyers, but we're going to get a settlement here. We're not going to trial. Because if we go to trial, we're not going to win enough to cover our expenses. That is also what plaintiffs' lawyers do very, very often.
Numbers? You want to give us anything in the realm of what you think a settlement might be here?
I thought you were going to ask for legal fees. Legal fees are above 15 to 20 million at minimum for this, and that's just getting you through the discovery phase into the pre-trial phase. So it is unbelievably expensive, which is why most cases actually never end up going to trial. What the NFL will give Brian Flores, it's going to be de minimis.
What are you reviewing this week?
I want to talk about Ivan Reitman, if that's okay. Ivan Reitman passed away this week, and I don't know if you guys covered this on your show, but he died at 75, the father of Jason Reitman. That's not why he's known. The director of Ghostbusters. He did Stripes. He did Meatballs. And I wanted to review Ghostbusters Afterlife as just in honor of him. And I'm despondent about it. Ghostbusters 1 and even 2 were so good. Ernie Hudson, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, who's dead, who shows up in Ghostbusters Afterlife in one of the creepiest parts of a movie I've ever seen. They reconfigured Harold Ramis. It's not an actor in makeup. It's him dead, but he's alive, but he doesn't talk, and his family gave him permission, gave Jason and Ivan permission to do this, and it was so off-putting. Paul Rudd is in this movie. It's a bunch of kids who are trying to be ghost lovers and finders, and it was so terrible. And yet the Reitmans were involved, and I hate to believe that that's how people are going to remember Ivan Reitman or even Jason. Please don't. Go watch the original Ghostbusters, not the one with Melissa McCarthy, not the one Afterlife, the original, and you will learn that was a great movie. So Ivan Reitman, rest in peace. Ghostbusters Afterlife, absolute crap.
He's David Samson, host of Nothing Personal. You can get all the latest in the world of sports business and reviews like that one, which was a weird eulogy. It was an odd way to eulogize him.
And it was rage. It was rage in a bad movie.
Rage-soaked eulogy for Ivan Reitman.
I saw what just
and
happened.
Harold Ramis.
I saw what just happened there. A child David Samson, who learned how to love movies because Ghostbusters spoke to him, and it birthed all his love of movies 40 years later, was disappointed that they would shit on his childhood memories.
That's confirmation right there. It's always bad news for me. I can't get into anything. That's why I don't like Stranger Things all that much. Anytime little kids try to solve like big time problems, like that have real life consequences, that, you know, it's a life and death circumstance. Nah, not for me.
What about the Hardy Boys?
No. No, the tag team, yes. The book series,
Sean
no.
Cassidy, Parker
No, like,
Stevenson.
The TLC match at WrestleMania 2000, 100%.
What a great
Absolutely.
callback. How old are the Hardy Boys? How
Hardy Boys are
And the
well
Nancy
into their
Drew
40s.
Mysteries. Yeah, what was that? The
All of this,
1920s?
all
Or was
of
that the
this.
1970s?
No.
Are you a Matt or Jeff guy? Most people go Jeff. I go Matt.
I
He was
a
really
straight
the
Sean
creative force
Cassidy
behind
guy.
it.
I had a poster of the Hardy Boys in my room. Next
So
to
did I.
Farrah Fawcett's
Wow.
So did
poster
I.
in the red
wow, no,
swimsuit.
you did.
We both had posters of the Hardy Boys. Just different Hardy Boys.
It's such an ancient reference. His Hardy Boys is so much better than your Hardy Boys. And it's so unspeakably lame that you would have the Hardy
That
Boys
is like,
on
you
your
did not have
wall.
many friends.
I cannot believe you had the Hardy
I bet
Boys
you
on
counted
your,
your
wall.
posters, two of your friends. There's no, a Hardy Boys
Like,
poster.
David,
A
there-
poster of a book
that
is
couldn't
just
have been
like
Are we
so
still
lame.
recording? I
yes,
just want to
of
know.
course we are.
Okay, I have nothing further to say. It's an outrage that you are making fun of my love of the Hardy Boys, because that's how my education started. Farrah Fawcett and Sean Cassidy.
Poster of a book.
It's
Book is the poster.
It's unbelievable. I can't believe in my childhood I never walked into the room of a child so lame as to have a Hardy Boys poster.
I used to have a quote board, and I would have quotes like from the Thornbirds with Richard Chamberlain and Rachel Ward.
What kind of childhood is that?
Jess, do you understand anything that is happening right now?
I zoned out after Hardy Boys.
What kind of childhood is that? The Thornbirds?
You have no idea the lack of emotionality that I was modeled and the lack of anything family related, that I looked for anything to surround myself with in my room. And so I would have these amazing quotes. Duran Duran from Save a Prayer. Like,
Oh, great track.
This is such a good room. Next week we'll go through your room
I think
and
you won me
tell us-
over with say a prayer. I'm back. We might be friends.
Save a Prayer.
Save a prayer. I'm sorry. Misspoke. I love that track.